I'm going to walk around, not to make you nervous, but to ease my nervousness. Okay? And I think the technique is going to work. Good. Good morning. I'm going to walk you through the work that my team and I have been doing actually in the past 20 years on developing different modalities for group treatment of asylum seekers and refugees who have been submitted to torture and mass human rights violence in our center in the Netherlands. First of all, I'm going to show you some background of it. So the paradigms that I have developed some years ago and which I coined as an integrative contextual paradigm for understanding of the impacts of exposure to mass human rights violence on individuals and communities. So just in order to understand how we look at the problem and how we try to figure out the impacts and also to design interventions to tackle them. Then I'm going to show you and talk a little bit about some of the group approaches that we have developed and actually the ones that we have also submitted to scientific evaluation in the past years. And finally, I will share with you some of the research results which have also been published. So for those who want to know more, I will share with you the references. Anyhow, I promise you there will be no statistics because I personally hate to see all these diagrams with a lot of numbers. So all of that can be found in the papers published because there they have to be. Okay? Ready? All right. So the whole model, which I call the integrative contextual model, is based on the premise that the matter of health is actually the matter of balance between the sources of damage and the sources of resilience, okay, throughout the life cycle. So whenever a certain threshold has been reached, this might get unbalanced and may mirror itself in, let's say, mental health problems. And then yet again, as life goes on, as resilience strengthens, the balance may be reached again, so one may be rebalanced, and then yet at another phase in life, the balance may be damaged again. And every time, mental health problems that people present with may be different. So we are not, in terms, when we talk about the exposure to mass human rights violence, I prefer not to talk about categories anymore, like post-traumatic stress disorder or depression, but more about the whole spectrum of different phases of the impacts which exposure to traumatic experiences, mass human rights violations may have. And all these resources of both either damage or resilience can be found on different levels of what Bronfenbrenner and Derek was talking about that earlier today, has coined the ecological environment of the individual. And we basically took those circles of Bronfenbrenner, but we have also put it into the developmental perspective. So meaning that both sources of resilience and damage can be found on the intra-psychic level, but also on the level of what one calls the exosystem, so, or the exosystem, the primary societal group, on the larger scale of participation and rooting of an individual within the society, and finally onto the macro level where we talk about issues like culture, subculture, religion. On all these levels one can experience pain, and one also can get very inspired and resilient and empowered. And then what we also try to look is actually how this balance between the sources of damage and the sources of resilience have unfolded throughout the life cycle of the individual. And this is the developmental perspective which we have added to the Bronfenbrenner model, in order to understand what have helped people, what have brought people primarily out of balance previously in life, and what helped them to rebalance again in order to be able to tackle the right and to design the right treatment of assistance strategy at the moment that clients approach us. Okay? So, and whenever we do this analysis, we always search for causality and ask ourselves, in my opinion, the crucial why question. So why is someone coming to seek assistance now? Why not 10 years ago? Or why not in 5 years' time? You know, what makes him to unbalanced right now in his point of life, and what may help him to recover again. And I think in this whole process, the process of meaning making, of what has happened to a life and reattaching to humanity is the central one for an individual to regain control over his or her life. So whenever we design treatment strategies, it's all about that delicate balance between the personal and the socio-political, between the pain and resiliency, and between the private and the public, because we all know trauma and mass human rights violations occur not only on the private sphere, they also occur on a very large public scale. So we try in designing the interventions to target all those levels of the ecological environment, not meaning that we as clinicians, because my context and background is a clinical center for treatment of this group, but to identify the needs and eventually to delegate this to other professionals within the field to deal with them, to tackle both pain and resiliency, to shift interventions throughout the treatment process between these different levels of the ecological environment, definitely to see the problems our clients are presenting with as multidimensional and not to have this either-or attitude, because all of our clients are not presenting only with a psychological or psychiatric damage, but also with medical, social, political, cultural, existential breakdowns. And of course, this developmental perspective, which I have shown in the model, I think is also very crucial to understand the dynamics throughout the life cycle. Okay, oops, all right. So if you look on the other hand at the mainstream trauma treatment, PTSD treatment, and what the expert thinks about the treatment of complex or chronic traumatic consequences, is that sort of idea is that these treatments should be sequenced and phase-based, although we have to admit there is not enough evidence yet for this kind of treatment, but they have been pretty heavily promoted and executed. The more the complexity is, the longer the treatment should take place. And as always in this kind of sequenced multi-phase treatment, the first phases are about the safety and stabilization, and then in the following phases one applies much more the trauma-focused interventions. And what we also know that all kinds of life stresses, and when we talk about asylum seekers and refugees, these are really crucial and omnipresent facts, are forming a huge risk for relapse. Okay, why groups? Also not a very popular and almost barely studied approach in treatment of complex trauma. Well, let's start with probably the last reason. As many of you working in this field may have, we also face financial problems and the lack of staff. So it was much more economical to do groups and treat 10 persons in an hour and a half sessions than to do individual sessions. We still simply didn't have the stuff. But we also sort of thought, you know, a lot of our clients come from the societies which are collectivist, where one realizes itself through meaning something for the other. So putting people in the group may have also an extra healing effect. Another reason is that most people who were forced to migrate are submitted to social marginalization and alienation in a new context of the host country. So again, forming a kind of alternative in the first place in vitro within the clinical facility, the social group may also help them to extrapolate this experience and to dare to attach to people also outside of the clinical facility. Violence is also a collective experience, why healing should not be. And that's where, and of course there are some universality of problems within the clients that we are treating, and some as we all know, all the people who do the colleagues who do the group psychotherapy, there are also these universal healing elements of group, like meaning making, mirroring, cohesion, group as a safe container. So we hoped and believed that most of our clients may profit from this approach. And we call it the Den Bosch approach because our center is settled in the Dutch city of Den Bosch. It is a multimodal sequenced model. It's not depending on a judicial status, so meaning that both asylum seekers who are still confronted on a daily basis with threat of repatriation, huge existential uncertainty, and refugees who are recognized and may stay in the host country can profit from the treatment. We combine psychological, medical, and social intervention and do a lot of advocacy, and I think this is one of the crucial healing elements of the whole program. We combine verbal, in this case group psychotherapy, with non-verbal experiential therapies. In our case, the psychomotor therapy in the gym, art therapy, and music therapy. Of course, we try to all the time adapt the model and to make it as culturally sensitive as possible. And it is, of course, phase-based. I will show you later on the phases. One of the things when you look at the group therapy literature, the criteria for participating in a group psychotherapy are usually very high and very exclusive. Now, in this case, they are not exclusive at all. So none of our clients do not have previous experience with any kind of psychotherapy. Secondly, most of them, or majority of them, do not have stable life arrangements. Think about asylum seekers. And also most of them come from the cultures where sharing problems, disclosing problems with strangers are not a very, let's say, a common concept. Thinking about disclosure as being quite a Western concept. So, however, people engage in this phase-based program, and this is the worst slide I have. I hope that people who are sitting in the back can see something. This is more a kind of, because of my own obsessiveness. But there are 5 phases, and as you can see, in the first phase is all about, I walk you quickly through, it's all about norms and values, setting them about psychoeducation, about what the impacts on all levels of ecological environment can be. Stabilization of symptoms, if necessary, also with medication, and forming the treatment expectations. And then in the second phase, in this group process, the clients present their life stories, both the good and the bad parts of it, and they are not required in that phase to go deep, in depth, as of the most traumatic experience they have been through. This is something that happens in the exposure form, imaginal exposure form in the third phase, where they do exposure within the group setting, meaning that each session one of the 10 clients tells his or discloses his most traumatic event, and the others are listening in the form of a Greek theater, and of course supporting him afterwards. So you've got this element of direct exposure, and you have the element of vicarious exposure, listening to the stories of other group members. We tape these stories, and we ask our clients to listen to them at home. And they usually ask us, how long should I listen to this? And we tell them, listen to them as long as you don't feel very upset while listening to your own story. And usually it turns to be 8 to 10 times. And after that, the anxiety and the arousal starts sort of to decline. In the first phase, in the fourth phase, we symbolically leave the past behind and are busy within the group sessions with the themes linking the past to the present to the future. So we explore a lot the impacts of trauma on core beliefs. We explore a lot the communication and functioning of an individual within his family and within the society. We try to explore and install hope and future outlooks. And finally, in the fifth phase, to be focused again on relapse prevention, evaluation of the treatment, and planning, very important farewell rituals. Throughout all these phases, advocacy, and then you should think about writing letters, collaborating with the lawyers in terms of asylum-seeking cases, writing letters to the migration authorities, influencing the personnel in the asylum seeker reception centers in order to make the whole stay of our clients there better and more human are an integral part of this approach. Well, after that, some of the clients who want can join a self-help aftercare program with our institution, but some choose for that and others don't. Good. So what you can see briefly is that we combine different techniques within the model, that the model is both symptom but also goal-oriented in order to improve the functioning, the quality of life, the resources, the well-being of our clients. It's quite an extensive and intensive form of treatment, lasting for a year with 85 sessions throughout that year, twice or three times a week, and combined with either two, so the group psychotherapy twice a week, combined with either 2 or 3 nonverbal sessions within the same week. So now I'm going to switch to the
5 more minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to switch to our research. So what we actually did is that we have compared some groups. These were groups that were having, let's say, all of these groups have 2 group psychotherapy sessions a week. Okay, the first subgroup has also 3 nonverbal therapies and executed in 3 times a week. The second group have 3 nonverbal therapies but executed in 2 days a week. The third group has 2 nonverbal therapies and is also executed in 2 days a week, and there is a waiting list control group. Okay? They're all of closed type, so no new people come in, same gender, same language, same interpreter. Most of the years we did run this group with clients from Afghanistan and Iran. No earlier treatment, same interpreter, okay. And what you see then in terms of results, and I would like to see that anyway, all treatment groups show better results than the control group, which was very promising. But contrary to our expectations, the same results, equal results were found in those groups executed in 3 days a week and 2 days a week. While we thought, all our clients have such unstructured lives and they may profit from more engagement on a weekly basis, but this is not the case. What well mattered is the amount of nonverbal therapies combined with the group psychotherapy. So basically suggesting that the nonverbal therapies are very distinct components within these programs, but also suggesting that the exposure in a group format, which has been a point of discussion within the scientific world, may also work. If you look at the long-term results, we have done one of the things that I think are quite unique. We have followed those clients for 7 years. So we had a 7 years follow-up study. And what you see then is the decline, further decline upon termination of the treatment of, in this case, unfortunately, we were only focused on very mainstream diagnostic categories like PTSD, aggression, and depression and anxiety. The symptoms are declining up to 5 years after the completion of the treatment, and then they start to worsen, but they never reach, the threshold for a clinical significance of the diagnosis, which was very, very promising. So to conclude with, results are promising on the short term, also on the long term. Over time, the gains are maintained by reduced. Here are also, I think, do people got the slides? I don't know, but here are these results are published in 2012, 13, and 13 in different journals. Well, to conclude with, this is how all of us who do groups sometimes think about the group dynamics and about our clients. But after all these years, I'm hoping and well, believing in the group as an approach. And just to close with this proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you're going to go far and accomplish more, go together in a group. Thank you.